Here at our luncheon. Let me tell you a little about your guest speaker today. Captain Mark Mclean is native of Bullard, Texas. So he is one of us. He's a Texan, right? Some of us native born and some not, but he is an actual native of Texas. Graduated from the University of Texas at Tyler in '97 with a Bachelor of Business Administration and Accounting. My friend over here probably likes that. A bean counter. He also holds a Master of Arts in National Security and Strategic Studies from the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. After earning his Naval Aviator Wings at Vance Air Force Base, Oklahoma in '99, Captain Mclean served operational assignments with the Ironmen of VQ-3 at Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma from 2000 to 2003. Where he was an E6AB Mission Commander Evaluator and an E6AB Assistant NATOPS Instructor Pilot, and then remained at Tinker from '03 to '06 to join the Roughnecks. I hope we hear about that. VQ-7 as an E6AB Assistant NATOPS Instructor Pilot, instructing student pilots in the E6AB 737-200 and 600 aircraft. In 2006, Captain Mclean transitioned to the full-time support community and reported to the VR-59 Lone Star Express at the Joint Reserve Base here, where he eventually designated a C-40 Assistant NATOPS Instructor Pilot and completed his department head tour while flying missions all over the world. His staff assignments, and I thought this was kind of cool when I read this, included tours on the staff of Fleet Logistics Support Wing in Fort Worth in 2006, as a Battle Watch Captain for the OpNav staff in the Pentagon from 2001 to 2014, and Chief of Staff for the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Force Education and Training from 2017 to 2020. Wow. Mclean served as the Executive Officer and Commanding Officer of the Navy Recruiting District, Michigan in Indiana from 14 to 17 and assumed command of Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base, Fort Worth, Texas in 2020, just when I was retiring. Right? He has accumulated more than 4,000 flight hours in numerous aircraft. His personal awards include the Meritorious Service Medal, Navy Commendation Medals, Navy Achievement Medal, and various unit awards. I can't wait to hear his story. I think it's going to be pretty good. So y'all welcome the captain. Judy's going to get the lights for us.
All right, well, thank you for that kind introduction. I certainly don't deserve the round of applause being in this room, but I thank you for it anyways. Let's start here right at the beginning. So when I do these presentations out in town, sometimes I forget to go over this first slide, and then afterwards somebody will come up and ask me, where'd you get the call sign Burger? So by the way, whoever gave the introduction with Mr. Dale Robinson, I was in that picture. That was taken just a couple of days ago on Tuesday. I am the head squid in that picture. As Mary said, I'm the commanding officer out at the Naval Air Station. What a privilege it is to serve in that capacity. I am from Bullard, Texas. For those of you who don't know where Bullard, Texas is, it is just south of Tyler. Everybody knows Tyler, Texas, because if you watch the Houston Oilers, back in the day, Earl Campbell was the Tyler Rose, and that is my hometown, so I couldn't be more proud to be here. Coming from the young boy who would come up to Carswell Air Force Base and stand on this flight line and watch aircraft in the air, to now leading the men and women that serve our Army, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, and the Air Force. Everybody knows it was Carswell Air Force Base, right? Couldn't be more proud. And listen, on behalf of the 10,000 men and women that serve in uniform, active reserve, and the DoD civilian, on behalf of them, thank you for your service and thank you for paving the way for who we are and what we do today. If they were here, I think we would say thank you over and over again. But the first slide, so I am the commanding officer. Most people call me Mark. Burger is my call sign. Not very cool, is it? McDonald's had a Mclean Deluxe hamburger back in, that's where I got it. Mclean Deluxe hamburger back in the late 80s, early 90s, and as I'm going through flight school, I run into a commanding officer at some point. We're out at Edwards Air Force Base, and he's teaching me how to fly the 707, and I'll talk a little bit about that mission here in a moment. But we're sitting around at the officer club, Edwards Air Force Base. There's not much else to do out there other than fly aircraft, play golf, and sit around the O Club. And he said, I think we're going to call you Burger. I was a young lieutenant junior grade at the time, and that's not really how I got the call sign. The reason I got the call sign is because I told him I didn't like it, and I pushed back. Here's this young lieutenant junior grade telling the Navy 05 he didn't like his call sign. So he goes back to his room that night, sends out an email to the entire squadron and says he didn't like his call sign. So I checked into my unit, and everybody came up to me, shook my hand, and said, welcome aboard, Burger. I show up in Newport, Rhode Island, some 22 years later, and my old commanding officer at the time was Commander Peggy Klein. She went on to be a 2-star, Rear Admiral Peggy Klein, who's now the president of the Ethics Center up at the War College. And I'm in a room with 8 other commanding officers, and she's talking to us about some ethics training. And she looks over and sees me and makes this connection and says, Burger. How long has it been since I've seen you? And she comes up to me afterwards and starts talking to me. She says, I don't even know if I ever knew your real name. So many people called you Burger. So I embraced it shortly thereafter. It has stuck, but you will see in naval aviation, sometimes we do not embrace the cool call signs. We give people the call signs that naturally come to mind when we see their last name. So let's see if I can click through this. Okay, so this is my bio. Mary just talked about it. I'm going to run through it with you in pictures. I'm a visual learner, so I brought a bunch of pictures today. Hopefully I can keep you interested. We're going to talk a little bit about the base history. We have been under a couple of different names since 1942. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to celebrate the 80th birthday of the installation of federal property right here in Fort Worth. So we expect that to be coming up here in the summer. But this is me, and I will tell you right off the top, those first 3 pictures is where I thought my career was going to be encapsulated. That's where it was going to end. I joined the military, and you asked a great question, Mary. What influenced you? My influence was my grandmother that sat me down at the kitchen table and talked to me over and over again about her first husband's service to this nation. He died during the D-Day invasion. Her brother's service in the European theater, who would pull out archived photos and talk to me about service to the country. That's why I joined the military. But that wasn't my main priority. My priority at the time was to come in, fly big aircraft in the Navy, go out and fly in the commercial world. That changed a couple years in. I fell in love with service to my country, being a naval officer, and being a leader and a mentor to the young men and women who raise their right hand and swear to an oath to defend this country and our values. But this is where I started. T-34 is the first aircraft. That's the Navy trainer. We no longer use it anymore. We transitioned over. That's how old I'm getting. Transitioned over to the T-6 Texan. That is a joint trainer that both the Air Force and the Navy are using. I selected about halfway through flight school the aircraft I wanted to fly, which is the one on the far right, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But based on flying that aircraft, they sent me up to Vance Air Force Base. So I'm a Navy officer. I went through Air Force training for the last portion of my aviation training. So I was the one naval officer in a class of 15 other Air Force pilots. That is the T-1 Jayhawk you see at the top middle. Far right is the Navy Xb70. It's a 707 aircraft. We do 2 separate missions now. One is the Looking Glass mission. Looking Glass mission, we trail a long copper wire out the back of the aircraft. This is a Cold War mission that we've been doing on the C-130 going all the way back to the 50s. In the event that an adversary puts intercontinental ballistic missiles into the air. These aircraft are the backup for communicating to the nuclear submarines out underwater around the world. So that antenna that gets trailed outside the back of the aircraft, I think in this audience, when I talk Crimson Tide and Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman, everybody knows who that is. If I say Gene Hackman on the bass, I get a lot of, sir, I don't know who you're talking about. Crimson Tide was that mission. They break open a little cookie, we call it a cookie, emergency action message, and they see that message to be the orders from the President of the United States, from the Pentagon, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This aircraft is sending that message out to them to tell them who the adversary is and where the target is. It used to be a 24/7 mission where an aircraft was always in the air on both coasts. Now it's stood down to an alert mission where there are men and women on alert at Travis Air Force Base, Offutt Air Force Base, in Pax River, Maryland. That was one mission, the Looking Glass mission, communication link to the ballistic missile submarines. The other is an airborne command post mission where we go up to Offutt Air Force Base and we carry a flag officer with us who has command authority to launch nuclear weapons out of the silo if need be. Now there's commanders in those silos, as many of you know who were in the Air Force, but in the event that that capability is not there, and this is the unclassified version, that aircraft has turnkey capability to launch out of those silos. And I got to do a couple of the training missions out at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California and sit in the air up to 25,000 feet and watch that missile come out of the ground in the middle of the night and take off west over the Pacific Ocean. Pretty cool. So as Mary said, I did that for 3 years in the Iron Man Squadron. Then I went over to the Roughneck Squadron, teaching young men and women how to fly the 707. They generally show up to the Readiness Air Group with about 200, 250 hours in any kind of aircraft. I was one of them. So I became an instructor. And as you can imagine, that's a fun mission when you're out underneath the tanker, 15 to 20 feet under another 707, teaching a young man or woman how to take fuel off of an aircraft. A lot of fun, good memories there. I transitioned down here to Fort Worth. This is a C-40, also known as a 737. No different than what you fly on American Airlines, Southwest Airlines. The Navy currently, at the time when I was in it, the Navy had 9 of these aircraft. We are up to 21. The Marine Corps is about to get 2 737s. They're going to be stationed right here, Naval Air Station Fort Worth, beginning, I think, in January. The mission is to fly Navy and Marines around the globe. As you can imagine, it's not a great optic to put someone like me with this haircut, this uniform, that big sea bag on a commercial aircraft in the Middle East. So this is the airlines for the Navy and the Marine Corps. Transcom mission in the Air Force, very similar, but on different aircraft. Some of the missions I got to do, you can imagine how much fun they're having in the back. We put 120 Marines in the back of an aircraft, and we're taking them over to the Philippines or Thailand or all places in between. Hearing them back there singing as a group, carrying on, proud to serve their country. Those were most of the missions, Navy and Marines, but we do some USO missions where we'll take USO entertainers, Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, the Harlem Globetrotters. I've carried marine mammals. When I say Navy SEALs, yes, we've carried Navy SEALs, the actual warfighters, but I've also carried Navy SEALs, the marine mammals, because the Navy has a mission where we train marine mammals to go down into the water and detect adversary mines. So we will fly them back and forth at times from the West Coast to Hawaii for that training. So dolphins, sea lions, marine mammals, a lot of fun. This picture in the middle, and the formatting didn't quite work out, but it overlays the other ones. This is the family. Everyone in this room knows you cannot serve your country without that support system behind you, right?
Amen.
This is my support system right here. I thank them for their service all the time. And when I say thank you for your service in this room, that thank you extends to your family that supported you when you were in uniform. They are part of that service to our country in the Department of Defense. This is mine. So you can see my wife peeking behind my shoulders. She saw this picture for the first time. She's like, you can barely see me. She's a little 5'2" lady from East Texas. We met growing up over there, and she's been with me for 20 plus years now. These are our 4 kids. Blaine in the back, he's still back in DC. My 2 twin boys, 19 years old, freshmen in college right now. They're headed into uniform. They're going to be naval officers. Both of them want to fly for the Navy, and then this is my youngest here, Pride and Joy Macy. She's a sophomore over at Arlington Heights High School. She does not know it yet, but she is probably bound for naval service. I try to tell her every day. She ain't quite picked up on it yet. Not as quick as her brothers. She's smarter than her brothers, but not quite there yet. No, I hope she gets to do whatever she wants to do in life. I know she will. This is the C-40 at night, just kind of a cool picture there over the Pacific Ocean as the sun's going down. These are my staff tours, not related to flying on the bottom. Navy blessed me with the ability to go earn a graduate degree at Newport, Rhode Island. If you've never been to Newport, Rhode Island, you gotta go. It is an incredible place to visit. This is Fort Adams. I think Fort Adams dates back to like 1845. I lived on Fort Adams. The house I lived in while I was going through War College was built in 1870. One of the best places to spend time with the family. Got to go to school, that was my job at the time. I moved on. I did 2 tours of the Pentagon, one for Office of Secretary of Defense. She said Force Education and Training, but the majority of my job there was standing up a program at Johns Hopkins University, a Strategic Thinkers program. So this is an intellectual top gun for our officers in all of the services. We send about 12 to 15, we just started this a couple years ago, I helped stand it up. We send about 12 to 15 a year through Johns Hopkins University, and they go on to be strategic thinkers, the intellectual talent for our 3 and 4 stars that run the COCOMs around the world. And then this one in the middle, does anybody recognize that baseball stadium and that football field? That's Detroit. The Detroit Lions and the Detroit Tigers. My office, and I don't know, does it have a laser? It doesn't. Hard to see for me, but right there behind Ford Field, off to the right, there's a small building. That was my office. So I ran the recruiting district for the Navy for the state of Michigan and Indiana. And a lot of times I'm out at these 50-plus recruiting centers talking to our 240 recruiters. We put 41,000 men and women through boot camp last year. If you can believe that, 41,000 in this nation go through that boot camp. 150,000 new accessions every year go through all the services combined. But these men and women, and they're here in the local DFW area, are going to your high schools and trying to recruit men and women to join the service and go to boot camp. For us in the Navy, that's in Great Lakes, Illinois. When I wasn't out there visiting recruiting stations, a big baseball fan, and the Texas Rangers gave me the privilege to go throw out the first pitch back in I think it was September time frame. I got to do that, but I was over at that ballpark. I think I could hit probably a 4 or 5 iron for anybody that's a golfer in here into that stadium from my office. So quite a lot of fun. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about military history. Again, I brought some pictures today, and then we're just going to go over what we've been up to on the base. A couple of the units across all the services, mostly aviation, because I'm a pilot. So hopefully those non-aviators can forgive me, but we're going to talk airplanes today. Most people think Fort Worth's military history dates back to 1941. It really goes back further than that. 1917. What were we doing in 1917? World War I, right? 1917 to 1919. These aircraft you see in this picture are JN-4s, Jennies. Curtiss, I think, was the company that built those. These were the trainers at the time. They were right here in Fort Worth. General Pershing, who I think was the general over the European theater for World War I, recognized that Americans needed to be trained how to fly aircraft. The British at the time were doing it, and we were not. So he brought British instructors over here, used these Jennies to train both American and Canadian forces right here in the Fort Worth area. There were 3 airfields. Higgs Field over in Saginaw, which if you look on a satellite image, there is still a Higgs Field bombing target that is in the ground that pilots were using back in the day. I think there may even be a national historical marker over there on that site. Everman Field, which is obviously down in Everman, and then I think it's called Carruthers Field, which was over in Benbrook. So these aircraft, they fly at about 70 knots, 5,000 to 6,000 feet, back in 1917. Here we are 100 years later. You recognize these aircraft on the bottom, right? F-35. We've got the Navy version on the left, the Charlie. I believe the middle version is the Bravo that belongs to the Marine Corps, and then the Alpha on the right. So we go from 70 knots and about 6,000 feet service ceiling to Mach 1.5 plus and 50,000 feet in the air service ceiling. I've never even flown 50,000 feet. The highest the aircraft go that I've flown is about 41,000, 42,000 feet. So a lot of history here. We're going to talk about some of it. This is where it all began. So shot from above, I think this is late 1930s. This is where Fort Worth Army Airfield location first originated, right there in that green box. So let's talk about a few things on this picture. Lake Worth. You know the history of Lake Worth, some of you in this room, but for those who don't, City of Fort Worth had trouble fighting a couple of, I think probably two major fires as I've read about it, late 1800s, early 1900s, and they knew they needed a water source to help fight future fires. So they purchased 5,000 acres of land. I think they spent $1.5 million, went in and excavated that from 1911 to 1916, $1.5 million, and you got the reservoir Lake Worth, which has been our northern boundary since our existence, 1941, 1942. Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce is responsible for both the consolidated bomber plant and the installation being there. They recognized, right as we were prior to the U.S. Armed Forces entry into World War II, that, and this is their mission, right, Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, to pull businesses into the local area. They recognized that they needed to get in that business, and they dangled the carrot to get consolidated aircraft to build a bomber plant here in Fort Worth. At the same time, they worked with the government to convince the Roosevelt administration to spend $1.75 million to build an installation that was going to be, and I think for a time, it was a bomber training facility prior to the entry into World War II. So 1.5 to build the lake, 1.75 to build the installation. And I think this picture is interesting because you can't see it on here, but meandering road goes around the south side of the lake. That same road is still on the base today. It's still called Meandering Road. So even after the lake was built, the roads never changed. Roaring Springs goes right up the middle of what used to be the base, and it's still there today. So this is prior to the base being built, and I read about this story as I got here. These are PBY Catalina patrol boats. So these were being sent, this is Consolidated Aircraft that built these planes in San Diego, California. They were being sent over to the European theater prior to our forces entering World War II. And they can't make it from San Diego to Europe in one shot, so they've got to stop along the way, and they've got to land on water. So they reached out to a young man, a newspaper publisher here in the local area, Eamon G. Carter, and said, we need help with the logistics for our crossing over the U.S. Fort Worth's going to be one of our stops. Where can we land? 7 to 8 days, Mr. Carter and his team helped them with the logistics for landing on Fort Worth. I think there were 250 aircraft that were going into the theater from San Diego. This is about 40 that landed on Fort Worth. Consolidated was so impressed with the ability to support that, as the story goes, they decided that was all they needed to see to get consolidated aircraft as part of our installation. So it went from Consolidated to Convair to General Dynamics, which a lot of you know, and then present day Lockheed Martin. But this picture is taken looking back to the west. If you were standing on Jacksboro Highway 199 bridge, which is undergoing quite a bit of construction now, and looking back to the west, that's what you'd see back in 1940. So the base opens up in 1942. It's called Fort Worth Army Airfield. There's no such thing as United States Air Force until 1947, right?
Right.
This picture, I love it. This is a P-80 shooting star. I think we've got one of these on display. It's a static display. If you've been down Military Parkway on the base, there's this thing called the MOAB. It's the big bomb. MOAB stands for the mother of all bombs. P-80 is sitting next to it, and people go by it all the time and don't realize this was the first jet aircraft the Department of Defense had. The Germans in World War II had brought the Messerschmitt to the fight, and the Allied forces knew we had to match that somehow. It did not quite make it, the good graces of our young men in the Army, it did not quite make it into the fight in World War II because we had already declared victory. But I think 4 of them did make it over to 2 to the UK and 2 to Italy as reconnaissance aircraft. Did make it over there. And then it later went on to be, I think a variant was the F-80. It flew in the Korean War. For some of you, you probably recognize that name more than you do the P-80. I love this picture, 1, because it was taken on our base, but 2, we would never do this today. You've got a fueling truck out there, fueling over the wing. Everyone's out there watching.
Yeah.
So dangerous. And you got kids running around without shirts on. My favorite part of this picture is this kid right here in the front with his little Sailor Dixie Cup hat on. Possibly foreshadowing for what would happen in 1994, Naval Air Station, Fort Worth. But I love this picture. I saw this about a year and a half ago and thought, I've got to show this. This is our base history. Carswell Air Force Base. So by the way, most people know Fort Worth Army Airfield in this room. Most people know Carswell Air Force Base. Matter of fact, most people probably still call it Carswell Air Force Base, which is funny because my parents still call it Carswell Air Force Base. Mom, I'm the CEO of the Naval Air Station, and she tells her friends I'm the CEO of Carswell, which I'm fine with. We grew up there in Carswell in Tyler. So Fort Worth Army Airfield, Carswell Air Force Base, Naval Air Station, there's one more name. Griffiths Air Force Base. So from January 1948 to February 1948, Bob, you know, right? It's called Griffiths Air Force Base. Now that name moved. I think the Air Force recognized who Carswell was, where he was from, his involvement in this community as a young man and what he meant to this community, and changed the name, and Griffiths Air Force Base moved on to New York. I think it's since been decommissioned, but yeah, for about 58 days there, it was known as Griffiths Air Force Base. Just kind of some cool trivia there for you. Hey, everybody knows what this is, right? B-36, Peacemaker. Yeah, how many been on the B-36 Peacemaker or worked on in this room? A couple of you, part of the fire department that saw it on base. Pretty incredible aircraft. Still, I think the largest combat aircraft that DoD U.S. has ever owned. This aircraft was built, a couple of things, take note of 1949. A couple of things would happen in the late 40s. 1947, birth of the Air Force, right? Broke off from Army. 1948, Berlin airlift. And then 1949, the Russians had their first atmospheric test of a nuclear bomb. So this thing was, its purpose, from 1949, I think, till probably 1959, B-52 came along in the mid-50s, which made this obsolete. But its purpose was to put a nuclear warhead, or I'm sorry, a nuclear weapon on that aircraft and send it over to, at the time, USSR. It had a range of about 10,000 miles, so it could take off, be over Moscow, and come back to U.S. soil. Pretty incredible. 6 propeller-driven engines on the back. I think this photo is the Associated Press. They came out to the base. I can't be sure because I wasn't there, but I read about this. They came out to the base, put them on top of the aircraft. I guess it's fun to stand on the wings. Top right, I happened to be, and I told some of the gentlemen in the back, we were talking about this, I happened to be out at Pima Air Museum in Tucson back in the spring, and I had no knowledge of this. But my wife and I, and Macy, who doesn't know she's eventually going to be in the military, was with me, and that was part of her indoctrination in the military aircraft. We're walking around the Pima Air Museum, and there's 2 aircraft sitting side by side. One's a B-36, and you can't tell here, but on the side it says City of Fort Worth. Right next to it is a B-52, and I think it said Lone Star Lady. It's one of the B-52 tail numbers. They were right here, Carswell Air Force Base. Really cool picture. And that's a consolidated aircraft. I think they were built right here in the plant. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were built right here on site. Everybody knows who this guy is, right? Jimmy Stewart. No one has more credibility to be in a movie called Strategic Air Command than eventually General Stewart. He's a B-24 pilot. He joined. He didn't want any special treatment. He served in the European theater. I believe upwards of 20 bomber missions in the B-24 while he was over there. Filmed right here on Carswell Air Force Base. That tail in the back you see is an actual B-36. And I was reading this last night. The young woman, Gloria, that he went on to marry later in life, her last name was Mclean. Spelled exactly the same way. I swear to you, look it up. Gloria Mclean, Jimmy Stewart married her. I don't know if we're related or not. Okay, 1961, the Delta Wing supersonic bomber, B-58 Hustler. Who in the room is familiar with the B-58 Hustler? Yes. Oh, a lot of hands, yeah. Built by Convair. Yeah. Made to be a supersonic bomber that could outrun anything, same thing. I don't think, there was not a bomb bay on this. This was a combination fuel tank and nuclear bomb together. Yes. It was on the external portion of the aircraft. I think later the Air Force went in and put 4 separate places to hang weapons. The idea was that you get this up at altitude, it's going so fast you can't run it down. Of course, surface-to-air missiles became a thing around that time, and again, the B-52 came around and made both these aircraft, the B-36 and the B-58, obsolete. These guys are sitting here posing because they set 3 speed records right here on this day, 1961. They flew a mission from Fort Worth, Carswell to Paris. I don't know how the Air Force always gets to go to these cool places, but I'm reading this like, I've been to Paris one time on a commercial aircraft, and these guys are flying to Paris. That was their destination for this mission, but they won the McKay Award for achievement in flight. Air Force gives that out still to this day. These young men and women, or these young men were awarded that here at Carswell Air Force Base, 1961. 1963. So I talked to my young men and women on base about this when I had the opportunity. You all know this in the room. President Kennedy, his wife Jacqueline. I think if we look here, if I go back to my high school Texas history days, Governor Conley and his wife, and then I think that's a congressman. I think someone told me Jim Wright at the time. This is them arriving at Carswell Air Force Base in the top right, and then on the bottom left, they stayed downtown at the Hilton. If you ever go to the Hilton downtown Fort Worth, you'll see the presidential seal there in the lobby. At least I think it's still there. But this is them departing and going over to Love Field prior to being in the motorcade, and then you know what happens later on that day. Yeah, and then Rick Irving, where's Rick? Rick showed me, I gave this presentation one time at the Fort Worth Air Power Foundation. Rick comes up and shows me this picture taken on that same day. It's President Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy, and this young boy right in the middle of both of them. And it was Rick Irving. His family had brought him to the base that day to see the president. And I think you told me you didn't even know the picture existed until years later, right? Yeah. Rick's the one running around with the Army hat on taking photographs today. 1966, this is on the base. This hangar's still there. The Army uses it for maintenance. Matter of fact, all those little lollipop, some of you served on the base, you know the lollipops is where we used to park the B-52s. Those pads are still there, but this was celebrating, I think, 20 years of the Air Force. I love this picture because of some of the aircraft in it. The B-52 and the KC-135 are still in service today. But a lot of these other aircraft are gone. The U-2 in the bottom right, spy plane. Francis Gary Powers, everybody knows that story from school days. SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance aircraft Mach 3 still holds a lot of speed records today.
3 plus.
3 plus, okay, we'll throw the plus in there. We got the RB-57, what is that, the F-111, we got the Aardvark, the Hustler's in there, the B-58. Man, I'd love to get some of these aircraft on the base and show them off. A lot of them aren't flying anymore, but thought you'd really enjoy taking a look at that. I think this is the Xb70 the Valkyrie, so this was tested and meant to be a Mach 3 plus supersonic bomber. Had a couple of accidents along the way, never quite got there, but pretty rare occasion that it would show up to an air show and be a static display back in 1966. We were just talking about this with someone. How many in the room were here in 2008 when the space shuttle came in? Yeah. I was sitting on top of hangar 1050, which is now our Marine hangar. But when we talk 1.5 to build Lake Worth, 1.75 to build the base, this was the space shuttle diverted to Edwards because it couldn't make it into Cape Canaveral back in 2008. And they got to get it back over to Cape Canaveral somehow. It doesn't have a power plant on it that it can take off and fly and land. So the back of the 747 back in the day, $1.8 million to ferry that thing across.
American Airlines 747.
American Airlines 747? Okay.
Old airplane.
So I give all these 1-point-something millions, Lake Worth, the base, the space shuttle. I just finished refurbishing the water tower on base, $1.9 million. It's the value of the US dollar over the course of 110 years. This is the last air show we had on base. I showed this picture because this picture has not necessarily this exact picture, but events like these, special place in my heart. I would come up, my parents would bring me up here to Carswell air shows as a young boy, 2.5, 3 hour drive from Tyler, Texas. Aside from sitting in my grandmother's kitchen and hearing about, service to country, standing there on the Carswell flight line and looking up and seeing the Thunderbirds and Blue Angels, some of the best memories I have as a kid. And the large credit goes to shows like that on why our men and women end up joining the aviation side of our services. So 2016 is the last time we've had an air show. We are trying to get back to a place where we can have air shows on the base again. Alliance has stood the watch for us. They've had the Blue Angels and Thunderbirds going back to 2016. But we really want to get back in the business of putting all those vehicles out there and inviting the surrounding communities to learn about our missions on the base. I just thought I'd show you that picture. That's the Blue Angels you see there, the F-18s. Okay, so here we are present day. You don't need me to tell you that our #1 purpose on the installation is to train and deploy combat-ready forces. 19, 20, 21-year-olds, sometimes, even though they realize that, we have to remind them this is serious business. We raise our hand, we swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is serious, so serious that you may one day be asked to give your life in defense of this country or take someone else's life. Those are things that we have to take seriously. And we do that. We operationalize our heritage by holding these events on the base so that our men and women can be reminded, not that all of them did it, but be reminded of those generations that came before us. Many of you in this room, sacrifices you made to this country, but your brothers who made the ultimate sacrifice so that we can continue to live the way we want to live with the freedoms we have in this country. It is serious business. Here's what else goes into that. This is everything. So warfighter readiness, training deployed combat ready forces, and then this is everything the base provides to those 40 plus tenant commands who are there to deploy those combat forces around the globe. Two of them you know well. The 301st is flying the F-16 now, just got back from a deployment outside of the local area. I think they were gone, parts of them for a couple months, parts of them for 6 months. They came back this summer, and now VMFA 112, the Cowboys, the Marine Corps, flying the F-18 is over in Iwakuni, Marine Corps Air Station, Iwakuni, just south of Hiroshima. But certainly just a encapsulation of the support services we provide from a base standpoint. Operationalizing our heritage is the one that I find most important, because when we have an opportunity to get up in front of this new generation coming in, making sure they understand that connection, because you don't get military history in the school system, I think, like you used to. So it's our job and our mission to make sure they understand what that looks like. Okay, it's just a satellite shot of our base. In the blue, you can see current day Lockheed plant, and then up there in the top right, how many of you in this room were born Carswell Hospital? Anybody? I know every now and then I run into, we got one over here, okay, two over here, a couple of you.
I had 4 kids.
You had 4 kids born in Carswell? Okay. It's now the Federal Medical Center, the Bureau of Prisons, the low-risk female population over there provides all the landscaping services to the base. It saves taxpayers, a couple $1 million a year. They come over and mow our airfield and our installation property. I just point that out. That used to be part of Carswell Air Force Base. Here's how we're broken down. Believe it or not, you got a Navy captain running the base, but the Marine Corps, present day, is the biggest population between a couple of units, an F-18 unit, C-130 Juliet unit, Mouse 41, the MAG 41 wing, and then there's a 14th Regiment artillery unit that is out there in the middle of our airfield. Navy's behind them, about 23%, and then if you combine the Air Force, the Air Force wing commander wanted to do the math on this and combine the Air Force and the Air National Guard so that he could get to 24%. I said, it doesn't work that way. Texas Air National Guard separate from the Air Force, but we are really a joint force on that base. Okay, this is what's been going on this year. The 136 Airlift Wing, led by Colonel, it says Gerald, but it's Keith Williams. He's about to turn over this weekend. Congresswoman Granger is going to come in for that change of command. This was when Congresswoman Granger was here back in the summer. She was a big part of them trading in their old C-130 hotels. They've had them since 1978, and they got these new Juliet models. So what's the difference in a hotel to Juliet? They fly higher, faster, further. They can carry more payload. So you're going from 6 pallets, or about 90 personnel in the back, to about 8 pallets, or 130 personnel in the back. They got a new mission with that, the Era Medical Evacuation Squadron. So they're going to be a mission that goes into theater and is a flying hospital, pulling wounded men and women out of theater back to where they can get more than just emergency care. Kate Granger was nice enough to come out and be a huge supporter of this mission, along with the base receiving the F-35. So this picture you see here with their wing commander, they named the first aircraft the Kate Granger. So it gets to wear that paint of Kate Granger for at least its first year. The 136 was part of this mission, and there's some fun stories here. I'll tell a few, but I'm awfully proud of everyone on the base that participated in this. Northcom and FEMA District 6 figured out pretty quickly that the base did not lose power and that we were able to keep the runway open in the middle of all the chaos that was going on out in the DFW area. Many of you in this room lost power at some point during that storm. We did not. I figured out why. Because we were on the variable rate. Right? You know what I'm talking about. So our typical electric bill is about $150,000 a month. You see at the bottom, we paid $4.5 million for power in the month of February. True story. We're on the fixed rate now, though. We swap back over. That's to benefit all the taxpayers in the room. No, but you know, we have never had the ability really to clear our runway. That's 12,000 feet of runway out there. When I was flying in the squadron on this base in the 737, I can remember times when I would have a mission going overseas that had to be delayed. We'd be going overseas to Bahrain, Afghanistan, Iraq, and we'd be delayed for 2 inches of ice or frozen accumulation. It's hard to sometimes call it snow in North Texas because it's never really snow. But frozen accumulation on the runway, we had no way to remove it. DFW has, the Navy's never provided that. So when I got here, I was walking around the Public Works Department and I saw these, they're not even snow plows. They're snow blades that fit on the front of a Ford F-150. And I started asking them about it. Hey, what do you use those for? Well, we just use them to clear military parkways so that people can get back and forth to the commissary, the exchange, medical treatment facility. Like, no, we need to use them for the runway. That is our purpose, to train and be able to deploy being the key word, those combat forces. And most times combat forces are not necessarily F-16, F-18, but when they are, they need to get up in the air and they need to be able to train. The feedback I got was, sir, stop talking about it. You're going to jinx us. So sure enough, I'll take credit for the fact that we were talking about it back in the fall of 2020, and there we were in February, and those 2 snow blades on the front of a Ford F-150 went to work around the clock for almost 3 days, making sure that that runway was clean so that Northcom and FEMA District 6 could come in. And they brought, you recognize the Globemaster there, C-117, they came out of Travis Air Force Base, our own C-130s on the base, and then these guys, the CH-47 Chinook helicopter out of Grand Prairie came in, and we distributed 2.1 million pounds of water around the state of Texas. So many that were without clean water that were in need. And if you look, a water bottle is about a pound, so that's about 2.1 million bottles of water that were palletized and went to all these locations throughout the state of Texas. We did a few other things. Mayor Price at the time called up to the base and said there's a need in certain areas of Fort Worth for potable water. I know it's called potable water, but I say potable. People correct me all the time from the north, but that's how we pronounce it in the south. The Marines over at MAG 41 provided 2 450-gallon water bowls that are transported out to town by a 1-ton vehicle, and then a 900-gallon water bowl that they dropped off at the fire department. So the base was able to support, and I'm proud that the individuals on the base that even though they had their own emergencies, family emergencies out in town, made it their mission to be at the base so that we can pitch in and help the residents of Texas. 301st, you've seen the news. We are getting the F-35 Alpha. We expect that to be here probably summer of 2024. When I got here, we were on, myself and my community liaison officer, Mr. Ed Spurman, who's here with me today, former Navy officer himself. We're on phone calls with leadership from Air Force and Navy and the Pentagon. And I can tell you, Fort Worth was competing with 3 other communities for this platform. A large reason that Fort Worth was able to acquire the replacement to the F-16 is the community itself. The message back to the Pentagon, because the Pentagon's always worried about the environmental impact to the community. The message back to the Pentagon is, this community, if there's any other, loves the noise that comes from the base. I know that because people tell me all the time, it's the sound of freebie, right? So we probably get less noise complaints than any other air station in the nation. Now, I don't know if that's, they don't know where to call. We don't publish that number, which I'm fine with. But when we are out in the community, Ed and I, part of our mission is to make sure that when communities want to build residential property up close to the fence line, that we at least make them aware of the compatible land use as our definition. What is compatible land use with property, residential property, and zoning around the base? And sometimes we get into conversations with these developers, and we get local citizens that come up and say, I don't have any problem living right on top of the base. I've lived there, or close to the base my whole life. I love hearing the national anthem in the morning. I love hearing taps at night. Let's build it there. I love the noise. And that's not the support we're necessarily looking for, because we don't need residential property right on the fence line. But that message and the way you wrap your arms around us in this community went back to the Pentagon, and that is the reason I believe one of the 301st is getting the F-35, because they know this community supports the military like no other. Ms. Patton?
Yeah, at that hearing, the positive.
You talking about the public hearing?
Yeah, way outweighed the negative comments.
Yeah, there were negative comments, but there were more
The
positive
positives
comments.
outweighed it by far.
Large part, absolutely. So this is the F-35 Alpha. The wing commander actually told me when they deliver this to the squadron, because it's just across the runway, they actually still have to take off, fly around the pad, and come back and land, and then deliver it. That's part of the delivery. So summer of 2024, look for that. Hey, this is our Marine Wing Support Squadron that's on the base. These are mostly reservists. I wanted to make you aware of this. This unit, under the Innovative Readiness Training Program, this is a Secretary of Defense program where they allow communities to place applications for military support. And this is something that we're quite proud of. Camp Carter, YMCA camp, just to the east of the base on the other side of the prison, put in an application, and the Marines this summer sent all their heavy equipment over to the YMCA, and they cleared 10 miles of roads, trails, rebuilt bridges, tore brush down. I went over and met with Miss Holly Martin, if any of you know the camp director over at the YMCA. They have a wonderful facility over there, but they're short on funding. The Marines brought value to them to the amount of $750,000. But there's a mutual benefit to that. Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. There's a mutual benefit there. The Marines are looking for places to train. They have all this heavy equipment on base. Training on the base provides them no benefit. So to be able to go out in the community, bring their reservists in for 2 weeks at a time, stagger that, and get them all on that heavy equipment doing actual mission work and helping the community benefits the United States Marine Corps. So I am proud. I keep saying I'm proud, but I'm proud that we were able to help Miss Holly Martin and the YMCA over there. Great organization they're running. Named after that newspaper publisher, right? David G. Carter. Senator Ted Cruz was nice enough to come out and visit the Marine Corps before they deployed overseas to the Western Pacific. He spent some time in the hangar talking to them about their mission, thanking them for their service. The topic of COVID came up and how we're dealing with it in the military. But this is a picture of the F-18. Marines are flying some of the oldest F-18s in the arsenal right now. They'll probably be one of the last squadrons to get the F-35 Bravo. This aircraft on the bottom is, and you can see the red patch VMR-1. These are going to be our newest tenants here in January. All the personnel are on station. The Navy VR-59, the Lone Star Express, has been training them on this mission. They're going to get 2 gray 737s, and that's how we will help transport Marines around the globe. And then this is a future mission that we expect will move over from Grand Prairie. A lot of their training areas are out in Mineral Wells. So as that DFW corridor, the approach and departure corridor, gets more and more crowded, they're the last aviation unit over at the old Naval Air Station Dallas, known as Hensley Field nowadays. They're flying 6 Chinook helicopters for the Texas Military Department, have a federal and a state mission. You've seen them over here flying in our airspace at times. We have just come to an agreement where we think once construction is completed on 2 of those old B-52 maintenance hangars that are still on our flight line, we will move the 6 Chinook helicopters on the ramp, and you will see and hear them in our airspace. So I'm kind of excited about that. That should transpire shortly after I leave. This picture on the top right here, they came over for an introductory flight, put like 20 of our sailors on the back of that Chinook helicopter, dropped the gate, and went on a low-level river run out by Mineral Wells. So I've never seen our sailors smile so big as the day they came back from that flight. That was kind of cool. That's it. Thank you for your time. Well, you got me here. Yes, sir, in the green shirt there.
Sir, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do for our community. And you mentioned about...
Sorry. Thank you, man.
Am I too loud?
No, I can hear you.
You mentioned in your presentation about residents practically up to the fence line, okay? And then we see flights taken from the Naval Air Station every day,
All the time.
even Sundays.
Yeah.
But then you had a slide up there that said, tower operations, 24 hours, 5 days. We as residents would like to know, what 2 days that nobody's in that tower?
So that slide that you saw was only for that February winter storm. We don't normally keep the tower open 24 hours a day. We typically will close it 2300. I can say 2300 in this room, everybody knows what that is. But we kept it open around the clock to support that NORTHCOM mission. You will still see, even though the tower is closed, flights are coming in the middle of the night because we have an agreement with all of our tenant commands that you can land when the tower is closed. And this is a pretty cool thing that's been around since I've been an aviator. If you tune in the right frequency, it's called the CTAF frequency, and I can click on my microphone in the airplane. If I click it 3 times, the airfield lights up in the middle of the night. All the runway, taxiway lights. I click on it 5 times, it lights up even brighter. 7 times, and it's like a spotlight shining back at me while I'm on final. So 2 in the morning, we have men and women returning from European theater, Hawaii. The tower's not open, they got to land, tune to that frequency, all the lights come on. It's pretty cool. So that's why you'll see it flying in the tower.
Any other questions real quick?
Boulder, Texas.
Going once?
Boulder, Texas, yep.
Twice?
You got a question right here.
Oh.
Quick question, what's the main difference between the F-22 and the 35?
Oh man, you may, I
I'm
can't
sorry,
find this.
I apologize.
That's an Air Force question.
Well, I'll tell you this,
Just kidding.
they're making a heck of a lot more of the F-35. They only made, somebody in this room may know, just a couple hundred F-22s. They're going to end up rolling out thousands of these F-35s, and as part of our foreign military sales, they're selling them to all of our allies. I think 140 a year is what's probably impacted that, but you're talking about thousands versus hundreds.
Good. 186.
There's a question over here in the back.
You might make a mention of the big base barbecues you did for 18 years up there.
Absolutely. The civic leaders barbecue, we were not able to have it this year. Unfortunately, we, from Secretary of Defense, have a policy right now that if we have any gathering over 50, because we're still in this COVID environment and we have to protect the mission, that we have to route a waiver all the way up to the Pentagon. So we had to cancel the Civic Leaders Barbecue this last September. I don't think we had it in 2020 either. We hope to get back there this year. So I know a lot of you have been a part of that. And I will tell you this, I was unfamiliar with this organization until just recently. If there is a way, and I'm not going to make any promises, but if there's a way we can get you on the base in the spring or the summer and have this very event in one of our hangars, I know my security department would tell me that we've got event people that are coming through, because most of you have the ID card that gets through the base. But I would love to connect you with our current active duty and reserve that are wearing the uniform. We've got some massive hangars that we should be able to do this in. It's going to take some planning, but I think it's worth it to make that connection. I'd love to be a part of that. I'd love to be an advocate for your organization and see how we can make that happen. So I'm going to go back and talk to the smart people that work on my staff, and maybe the Fort Worth Air Power Foundation, some of these 501c that help us out on the base can help us get it at what right looks like.
All right, last question, and then we're going to move on, because we're running out of time, but you guys got some raffle drawings we got to get out. Okay, last one.
Yes, sir. Charles Crofton, just if you could give us an update on the Space Aid program anytime soon, when it's going to open up, or I know the COVID thing has had an impact on everybody, and I was looking forward to maybe a trip over to Honolulu when I get one.
You and me both. So when I was a recruiting district commander, I used to talk about Space Aid all the time. Not a lot of people, unless you're a retiree, understand it. I was able to take my family of 6 at the time all the way over to Kaneohe Bay and spend a week in Hawaii. Imagine how much that would cost. How many of you have taken available use of Space Aid in this room? Yeah? If you haven't, it's currently down. It's not being used. To answer your question in a roundabout way, I think we're getting healthier, we're getting back there, but it's probably going to be until we get to what we call health condition alpha. We're in Bravo right now. That doesn't do you much good, but the numbers are going to have to go down in the community pretty significantly before they open that back up. Yeah, it's a great question.
Well, sir, we are really thrilled that you're here to share those. How many of y'all love those old pictures? And you learned something new about what I still call those old Air Force people. But we really appreciate you being here and sharing that with us. And we hope that you'll come back, and
I will come back.
we definitely want to talk about you didn't spring that on me. I knew about that before you mentioned doing a lunch out there. So don't worry, we already talked about it. So we're going to work on that for y'all.
Thank you, Mary. I think Bob's looking at you here. I don't know if he had a...
Just a point of reference, that big bomb that you have on your base, that's the largest thermonuclear bomb ever built by this country.
I believe that.
Yeah, and it's only the B-36 can fly it.
Bob, thank you for all your support. I know you come out and take care of some of those grounds around that bomb and those other static displays. And I'm interested in getting Bob and his red fire truck over to the base at some point. He's the one that educated me on Jim Stewart Strategic Air Command, so I think I owe you a DVD back. I'll get it to you. Thanks, Mary.
Oh,
Thank you for inviting me.
sir.